Hi everyone, we're going to be starting day 12 notes. The topic for today's notes is solve by square roots part 1. So we're going to do kind of the simpler, more basic cases today, and then tomorrow's video will be a part 2 where the problems just get a little bit more complicated. But before we do that, we're going to go through I think there's 5 or 6 problems on here for a warm-up, just kind of recapping what we've done so far. I'm going to go semi-quick on these so that I could spend most of the time on the new part. So you can always stop the video, pause the video if I'm going too fast in this part, but that's just why. This is all review. So problem 1 is to simplify. How we simplified these is first we checked if it was a perfect square or we made the factor tree. So you can always break it down with the factor tree. However, the square root of 81, I put a star next to this because this is a perfect square. You should just know that that's 9. And then the next one, simplify the square root of a negative 100. So the first thing we did is we took out the negative. So I'm going to take out that negative. And then that negative sign right here means that I have an I in my answer. And you should also recognize the square root of 100. Again, I'm going to put a star next to it, is a perfect square, and it's 10. So I put the 10 in the front, and my answer is 10I. The next one, simplify negative 44. Again, separate out the negative in the 44. You're going to have to make sure you know that this negative 1 is going to give you an I. So just kind of keep that in mind. And then you could do your factor tree. Well, multiplies to 4. 4 times 11 multiplies to 4, 2 times 2. You want to look for your pairs, your matches, and underline your leftover. So when I write this, the 2 goes in the front with the I. The leftover 11 stays underneath. And there's my final answer. This next problem we did the other day, it is a subtraction. So when I have a subtraction problem, I need to distribute the negative. So I have 4 minus 2i. The 3 becomes a negative, and the negative 5i changes to a positive 5i. And then what you need to do is combine like terms. So combine the numbers. 4 minus 3 is 1. Combine the i's. Negative 2i plus 5i is positive 3i. And then that is your final answer. Okay, something kind of similar to that, but a little different, is multiplying. And this is where we did foiling. So just a little side note here. This is where you foil. F is first. So 6 times 2 is 12. O is the outside terms. So 6 times negative 3i is negative 18i. I is inside terms. Negative I minus 2 is negative I times 2 is negative 2i. L stands for last. Negative I times negative 3i is a positive 3i squared. Two things you got to do here. Combine like terms and make sure you remember that I squared is equal to negative 1. So let's clean this up. 12. Combining terms in the middle, that's negative 20i. Then I have positive 3, and then I put my negative 1 there, right? I have that orange circle. So when I clean this up, let's do this green part. I have 12 minus 20i, and then that becomes a negative 3. And then I have these numbers that I want to combine together. 12 minus 3 is going to give you a positive 9. Then you have minus 20i, and that would be your final answer. Last one for this little recap. It says, the problem says to solve for x. So this is what we've been doing. This is kind of takes us way back. You want to get x by itself. So if I want to get x by itself, I'm going to go ahead and subtract 9 to both sides. So I have 3x is equal to negative 27. Then I need to divide both sides by 3 so that x is completely alone. 3 goes into negative 27, negative 9 times, and that's my answer for x. So again, if I went too fast, just rewind or pause it and kind of do those, but I really want to get to the new stuff, which is solving by square roots. So here's the new problems. Actually, I need to backtrack for a second because I put something on here. Here's the new problems we're going to do. I'm going to kind of give you some rules, 4 basic rules to follow. The first rule here, and I'm going to keep these short and simple. The first rule is to isolate x squared. Isolate x squared. The second rule is to square root both sides. And again, I'll show you in an example. Square root both sides. The third rule is to put a plus or minus sign. And I know this is kind of weird, but just write those down. The fourth rule then is to simplify. If possible, always simplify. So just put those maybe like at the top of your paper or whatever. I'm going to keep talking about those, but those are the four things. And let me show you with an example. So problem 1, x squared minus 16 equals 0. Step 1, isolate x squared. So if I want to get x squared by itself, I need to move the 16. So I add 16 to the other side. So I have x squared equals 16. That's step 1. So I don't know, maybe put like a little 1 here. Okay, step 2 is to square root both sides. Okay, when you square root this little exponent of 2, it goes away. They undo each other. So then I'm going to be left with x equals the square root of 16. That's step 2. Step 3 is to put in the plus or minus sign. And I put the plus or minus wherever I inserted in a square root. So see where I put that purple plus or minus. And now what I need to do is simplify. So when I say simplify, I mean let's go ahead and break down the root. And this is one you should know. The square root of 16 is a perfect square. You should know that that's 4. So my answer is x equals positive 4 and x equals negative 4. That's what the plus or minus means. Okay, let's do the next one. Get x squared by itself. So we're going to have to move the 36 by subtracting it to the other side. So I have x squared is equal to negative 36. That's basically step 1. Step 2 is to take the square root of both sides. That's basically step 2. When I do that, that little 2 is going to go away, and I'm going to be left with x equals the square root of negative 36. But I have to remember step 3. Step 3 is to put in the plus or minus. So I'm going to put that over here on the side. That's basically step 3. Then step 4 is to simplify, and you have to be very careful here. So let's go ahead and simplify the root. So when I break this down, I have x equals plus or minus. I'm going to do negative 1 times 36. Two things to think about. This negative 1 is going to become an I, and the square root of 36, you should know that. That's a perfect square. So I have plus or minus. I have the I in my answer, and the square root of 36 is 6. So my answer is plus or minus 6i, a positive 6i and a negative 6i. Okay, number 3. First thing I'm going to do is isolate x squared. So I'm going to add 20 to the other side. So I have x squared is equal to 20. Then I'm going to go ahead and take the square root on both sides. That'll leave me with x equals, I'm going to put my plus or minus in there, the square root of 20. And I'm going to need to simplify this root. So I'm going to do it off to the side here. Well, multiplies to 20. 4 times 5. Multiplies to 4. 2 times 2. I circle my pair, my match. I underline my leftover. So when I write this, I have x equals plus or minus. The pair comes on the outside. The leftover stays under. So I have two answers, positive 2 root 5 and negative 2 root 5. Okay, let's get a little bit more challenging. I need to isolate x squared, so I have a lot of stuff around it. I need to move by subtracting the 102. So I have negative 6x equals negative 102. Then I need to divide by negative 6 so that I have x squared equals, and I think that should give me 17. And then I square root both sides. That's going to give me x by itself. I need to have my plus or minus, and then square root of 17. You want to figure out, can I break down the square root of 17? What multiplies to 17? 17 and 1. Well, that doesn't help me at all. So actually, this is as low as I can go. My answer is positive root 17 and negative root 17. Okay, there's 2 more for today. I'm going to go ahead and get this x squared by itself. See how that whole thing is in the parentheses? I get it by itself. So again, that's like step 1. Step 2 is to square root both sides. So this was like step 1 and step 2. When I do that, I have x plus 10. It kind of like broke free. It's by itself. Then I have to put the plus or minus, and then I have the root 90. So that was kind of like step 3. When I do this, I'm going to go ahead and see what I can simplify. So let's go ahead and break down 90. 9 times 10, 3 times 3, and 2 times 5. I'm going to circle my match, underline my leftover. So here's how I'm going to write this. X plus 10 is still over here, equals, plus or minus, the 3 comes in the front, 2 times 5, which is 10, stays underneath. Hopefully you notice that x is not by itself. I have one more thing to do. I need to subtract 10 to the other side because I need x by itself. So here's the thing. I subtract 10 to the other side and I put it in front of the plus or minus, and then I put the other stuff after it. And so there's my final answer, getting much more complicated. Okay, our last problem here. We need to get x squared by itself. So this fraction, the 1/4 in the front, is a problem. I'm going to go ahead and multiply by the reciprocal. Let's get rid of that. That's going to leave me with x minus 3 squared is equal to 16. I'm going to square root both sides so that x minus 3 is by itself. It kind of broke free there. And I need to put my plus or minus. And I have the square root of 16. Again, hopefully by now you notice that the square root of 16 is 4. The square root of 16 is 4. Okay, so I have x minus 3 equals plus or minus 4. You need to get x by itself, so you need to add 3 to the other side. And you put that 3 in the front of the plus or minus. So now I have x equals 3 plus or minus 4. This is kind of a special case because they're just numbers. So when I look at this, all I'm going to do is 3 plus 4, which is 7, and then 3 minus 4, which is negative 1. And those are my two answers. It's not so crazy as the other ones because they were just numbers, so I actually could break them apart and get my two numbers.